Our keynote speakers, it's a pleasure to have these two lovely young ladies with us today, Ashley Burch and Sarah, like tamale, Elmaleh. Yes, right? Yes. Challenging. And the keynote address is titled The End of the Everyman, Creating Engaging Protagonists Using Specificity. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Ashley. Ashley is a voice actor and writer who raps, quotes, about representation and issues of gender and identity in the games industry. She is best known as the star, writer, and co-creator for the web series Hey Ash, What You Playin', and as the voice of Tiny Tina in Borderlands 2. She is also the voice of Sasha Brous in Attack on Titan. You can, or will soon be able to, hear her in these other fine pieces of entertainment: Adventure Time, Bee and Puppy Cat, Awesome Knots, Chainsaw Richard, or Richard, whichever goes, Saints Row 4, Aliens, Colonial Marines, Guided Fate Paradox, Gravity Ghost, Children of Liberty, which we share a credit, and Seedlings. You can see her flail about on screen in... I didn't write that. Are you literally flailing?
Yeah, that's all acting is.
Then it's okay. In Baked Goods, Bored with Life, and School of Thrones.
Thank you.
And Sarah Elmaleh, I'm going to keep on saying it because I'm saying it right. Sarah is an actor who loves to voice games and also chat animatedly about them. That's not a pun. She sees now how it could look like on... She sees now how it could look like online. She sees now how it could look like one, but she would never do that to you on purpose. There we go. I got it up. She can be heard in a motley collection of indie titles, including Gone Home. I only voice... Don't worry, it's well written. I've only voiced 15 audiobooks. Don't worry, it's well written. Skulls of the Shogun, Johann Sebastian Joust, Red Shirt, Resonance, Gemini Rue, Codename Cygnus, which we share a credit, Children of Liberty, and soon Gravity Ghost. She's also written about games at outlets such as Killscreen and Kotaku, helped curate Kotaku? You think I prepped this? Come on. Helped curate Boston Fig and Killscreen's, how do you pronounce that? Ouya? Ouya contest. And spoken about games and voiceover at the Tribeca Film Festival, the SAG Foundation, PAX Prime, and the New Jersey Institute of Technology. So, without further ado, The End of the Everyman, Creating Engaging Protagonists Using Specificity, Ashley and Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Is this working? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ashley, and this is Sarah, and thank you so much for that introduction. Today, we're going to be talking to you about creating engaging and remarkable characters using specificity in the various games that you're all making. I'm sure you are, right? Yes? Good. And we're both actors, so to be appropriately cheesy and just to bother you all, we're going to do an acting exercise. So to start with, we're going to do a really simple scene, only 3 lines of dialogue, and Sarah's going to ask me for this pen. So just hold on to your butts because it's going to be great.
Okay. Hey Ash, can I borrow your pencil?
Sure.
Cool, thanks.
Wow. Stunning. Actually, that was really boring, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it was. So let's do something else. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to give Sarah a bit more specific context and motivation for her character so that she can actually go somewhere with that scene rather than it just being literal just exchange of a pen. So let's say that our history is that I am a washed-up celebrity who was probably popular in the 90s and has since been in nothing. And you see me in a library, and you loved me in Girl Meets Alien, or whatever the show I was in was.
Oh my
and you really want to talk to me, but you're really nervous, and so you're using the pen as an excuse.
Okay. Hey, Ash, could I borrow your pencil?
Sure.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, so that was cool. That was more interesting, right? Right? Okay. So now we're gonna bring it down a little bit. We're gonna make it a little bit sad. And we are going to do a different scene, completely different. Let's say in this one that Sarah and I used to be partners, as in lovers, and we had a bad breakup, which Sarah instigated. I know, right? And now realizes that it was a mistake, because obviously, and is trying to reconnect with me, and she's using the pen as an excuse.
Hey, Ash. Could I borrow your pencil?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, God. Oh, no. It's so sad. I hate it.
I hate it. I don't like it.
So hopefully you guys could see that in those last two scenes compared to the first one, there was a lot more meat. There was a lot more it was interesting about them. There was a lot more nuance. You could see, even though the dialogue had not changed and the action was exactly the same, that the context and the history that I established for Sarah made the scene completely different. She, in the first one, was like really kind of excitedly and like, but trying to like keep it cool, engage with me. And in the third one, she was again trying to engage with me, knowing that she had deeply hurt me, and my response to her was like a kick in the guts, even though it was exactly the same as all the other ones that I had given. Which is pretty much just a practical application to show you guys sort of the power of using specificity when you are creating characters or scenarios for games, but also in acting. And so we're going to be talking about specificity for this whole hour, so get used to it, sorry. And we're going to start, though, because we are actors, with some acting theory to sort of ground this idea.
Woo. Okay, so as we've sort of started to establish, specificity is the means by which actors move from playing ideas of people, concepts of human beings, to believable people or aliens or whatever the case may be. So we're going to borrow from this guy, Stanislavski, to talk a little bit about why. So Konstantin Stanislavski was a director and actor active at the Moscow Art Theater around the dawn of the previous century. And at the time, theater was very presentational, sort of melodramatic, and to his mind, superficial. So he decided to throw everything out and develop a whole new model for the craft, which is still the foundation of a lot of acting training. There's lots of different schools, but this is sort of, it continues to be relevant and sort of the basic education for actors today. So here are some of his concepts and how they relate to specificity and how that improved our scenes just now. Given circumstances and the history of the relationship. So any relevant information about the environment, significant facts that shape who Sarah and Ash, in air quotes, were to each other at this point in time, any emotional baggage that they bring into the scene. In voiceover especially, this applies because you more often than not don't have a scene partner. Unlike with most other types of acting, you have other people to act with. So one of the first things a voiceover coach will ask, I find directors don't usually do this, but voiceover coaches will ask if you have a specific person in mind. If you give like a really disconnected read, they'll be like, who are you thinking of there? And they usually mean a person from your life that you have a relationship to that's relevant to the scene, analogous to what you're doing in the scene. And that would be called a substitution. This technique is common in all kinds of acting, but especially important in voiceover. And that person must be specific, and you must have a strong, vivid relationship to them. So with Ash, I have the kind of 2 layers of that going on, because I have people that I might have broken up with and been bad to, to think of, but also I have a history and a dynamic with Ashley that I can use as we're playing the scene. I've seen Jennifer Hale ask for, the wonderful Jennifer Hale, ask for the names of actors playing, right, I know, ask for the names of the actors because she's been doing it so long and she knows her peers so well. She'll actually ask who's playing the part across from her so that she can use that and use their history in working the scene. She'll even try and sometimes target a casting director, at an audition and try and change them as a target for her to keep her engaged and to have an effect. Goals and objectives. So in these scenes, we determined that I wanted something very specific, that I wanted it from Ash specifically. I needed it from her and not just from anybody, and that I had to make active choices about how I was going to get it from her. One of our most recognizable and kind of fundamental qualities as human beings is wanting things and doing things to get them. The characters who reflect this best through a combination of strong writing, direction, and performance, especially and almost especially in the most mundane lines and seemingly unrelated moments, are the ones that we believe in, are interested in, and my thing won't turn, there we go, and relate to the most. There's a temptation and a danger for actors to focus a little too much on the outward stuff, on the character's affect, if you will, how they sound or look, or a particular way of saying a line that you just decide you are madly in love with, rather than focusing their energy on the effect they want to have in the scene, on the person that's opposite them. Or if you're looking, for example, at character art when you audition, your job is then to imagine how what they look like plays into how they try to get what they want, if it's something they use to get what they want, what it says about their history. So this concept of action is really important. By avoiding action and aiming straight at the result or the affect, you get a forced product which can lead to nothing but ham acting, which is Constantine at his most iconoclastic. So this emphasis on action and dialogue as action is especially relevant to our discussion of character and performance in games. Games are also often, if not always, plainly built on objectives and action, and enriched by providing clues to strong motivation behind those goals and strategies. Understanding how specificity functions in performance and characterization, viewing the player as an actor in your game, and giving them similarly potent bits of suggestion to absorb and then extrapolate from, will create compelling, inviting, and memorable game experiences.
And we are making a direct argument against blank slate characters as we're defining them in this talk, which is essentially the default character that we see in a lot of games, which isn't to say that having a character that is not voiced or like a Gordon Freeman type is inherently wrong, but we're going to be making the argument that creating specific choices within those characters can make them more engaging. So the idea that all characters need to be default, i.e. straight white men with not much personality traits established is not really the most engaging way to connect with your player and to get your player to connect with your world. It's actually counterintuitively not that great to try to make a one-to-one representation of your player in your world. It's actually more interesting and more engaging to have a character that a player can relate to, not necessarily entirely become, which is our next point.
Right, this idea that players crave or require characters that are either receptacles for themselves or like paper dolls that you can just sort of tab yourself onto very neatly, presumes a desire to insert or immerse themselves as they are in the game. And we talk about immersion a lot, all the time. It's like a favorite buzzword. It's kind of widely assumed to accurately describe the best, most desirable game experiences, and we think that there's more underneath that. Which is why we're going to start getting really strong wordy. The immersive fallacy. So Katie Salen and Eric Zimmerman in their 2003 book, Rules of Play, refer to this concept as the immersive fallacy, the idea that the pleasure of a media experience lies in its ability to centrally transport the participant into an illusory, simulated reality. That's very fun to say. One so complete that ideally the frame falls away so that the player truly believes that he or she is part of an imaginary world. They go on to challenge this conceptualization, saying a game player does become engrossed in the game, yes, but it is an engagement that occurs through play itself, as opposed to the persuasiveness of the simulated environment. Play is a process of meta-communication, a double consciousness in which the player is well aware of the artificiality of the play situation.
So former Uncharted lead designer and current USC professor, Richard LeMarchand, introduced us to this quote in his GDC 2012 talk, "Attention, not immersion, making your games better with psychology and playtesting the Uncharted way." So this is the quote. "The literal sense of the word immersion seems confusing. When we're immersed in a game, what are we under the surface of? Some kind of game design soup? The claim that you can make someone forget who they are and start to believe that they're someone else just by enveloping them in pictures and sounds of another place and time has never seemed quite right to me. And even if we could pull off this trick of making you believe that you're someone else, would you really want to? If I could reach into your mind, make you forget who you are while leaving all of your skills and emotions intact, and have you literally believe that you were Nathan Drake hanging out of the back of a cargo plane with a desert floor a quarter of a mile below you and a bunch of gun-wielding enemies up above you, you probably wouldn't be excited and entertained in the way that everyone at Naughty Dog hopes for the players of our games. In fact, you'd almost certainly be scared witless." Hello, children in the audience. Are there any of you? Okay. No disrespect, you understand. I know you're all very courageous.
So this is vague, but I'm gonna explain it now. So if immersion isn't exactly what's taking place, if it doesn't describe what's occurring, if it's not really me, the player, that's there in the game, who is, and how are we connected to them? What's the nature of this necessary mediation? We rely on player characters to extend believable emotional as well as physical touch points to the game world so that we may experience it through them, and we connect to them irrespective of superficial differences and through universally resonant specifics, through empathy and imagination and substitution. Let's disabuse ourselves of the notion that we can map perfectly onto the avatar in search of virtual reality bliss, and stop fixating on default race or gender or orientation as though it needs to match the player's own. Stop squatting in outdated assumptions about who the player is. Player characters vary widely and function differently. They are our lenses, partners, minions, any number of relationships that players and designers can playfully collaborate and even compete to define. But making specific decisions and deliberate commitments about your player character isn't smearing grease on the window. It is the window. Examples. So since we were talking about Uncharted, we're going to start with a third-person protagonist in a linear game. Seems like that invites specificity. I am a known Nate Drake fan, girl. I think he's fantastic, and the laws of generic every dude dictate that he should be quieter and a little less weirdly goofy in his particularly Nolan Northy way. And yet for many of us, the more vocal he is, the more simpatico we feel as player and protagonist. Naughty Dog takes a special approach to certain sequences outside cutscenes for which they do performance capture, where they'll play the game in front of Nolan, who then improvises based on what he sees. It's called chasing because the actor is following the gameplay with their performance, and it's really rare because it's super expensive to just sit there and wait for an actor to come up with gold. But the advantages are in how it elicits honesty and spontaneity, deeply grounded in the gameplay. And the payoff is there have been moments playing Uncharted 2 where our vocalizations, like my player vocalizations and Nate's vocalizations, have been actually identical, from relieved guffaws to very sweary exclamations to just happy, exultant yells. And I find it really fascinating that the chasing process takes the actor out of the soundstage, or the realm of like high-stakes physical gameplay circumstance, and into the seat and view of the player, experiencing a piece of entertainment. Immersion theory might suggest that absolute commitment to every single cracked rib would be more engaging, but I think taking a step back to sit in the player's seat, A, contributes extra room for humor, which is the tone of the game, which I love so much, and B, connects directly to the audience via their own perspective. It's almost less as if Nate brings us into the world and more that he brings it to us. Our experience of the game is more powerful because he actually affirms it.
So we're going to be talking a lot about Jennifer Hale, because we love her. But going from a very, very specific, a very linear storyline with Nathan Drake to a little bit more of a malleable character with Commander Shepard, and specifically Jennifer Hale's Commander Shepard. The interesting thing about her performance is that you can do so many things with that Shepard. You have, I think, 3 potential background choices for your character. You can choose to be Paragon or Renegade or some combination of the 2. There are so many potential options that you have to characterize her in whatever way you think is best. And the danger with that is that you might see the seams in between your choices. So as a player playing a character that could potentially go any number of ways, which sometimes seem completely contradictory, you might feel as you're playing her, she just said that because I chose it, not because it seems like it was the right thing to say in that scenario or whatever it happens to be. But the wonderful thing about Jennifer Hale's performance is that she makes a deliberate choice to connect all of her choices to the same character. So she treats Shepard, no matter if she's Paragon or Renegade or what have you, as the same character with the same basic motivation, which is to save as many lives as possible. And you can feel that in her performance, because there's no sense of discontinuity, there's no sense of like, where am I? Why is this person doing this random thing? You have a complete connection with her and the choices you're having her character make, because she made this very deliberate decision to ground all of her choices, the myriad of choices, which is very hard. She's a very good actor. Yeah. Everyone, she's a very good actor. In that one single motivation. And she carries it throughout the entire game over 3 games, which is, whew, that's great.
Okay, this is, okay. Yeah, right? I know. So Guybrush Threepwood is probably like hugely responsible for my sense of humor, which is very like esoteric and naughty, but also really silly. His super dweeby, like awesomely dweeby, but also kind of even-keeled and very conversational performance, I think, is kind of our best and brightest example of what an everyman actually looks like in games. Casting Guybrush wrong for the Curse of Monkey Island, which is the third installment, third title in the series, could have been really jarring if they got it wrong. I mean, we've had two games already to develop an affinity for this character and imagine what they might sound like. I think casting him right cemented him in our hearts forever. The thing I find interesting about adventure games characters, one of the things I find interesting about adventure games characters specifically, is that they can't do everything you tell them to try. It's just impossible to account and program for. So one of my favorite lines in all of video games is Guybrush's recurring rebuff, no, which is, it's this breezy, nonchalant, and total cop-out for a persistent design problem. And it's sort of a tease, like this glib tease at the player who like doesn't even really merit further explanation. It's just sort of beautiful. So adventure game characters can be historically actively rebellious and even break the fourth wall to address the player directly, given the 2D traditional perspective of the genre. But this doesn't damage our empathy for or attachment to them, nor our investment in the game world. But
we've been talking a lot about AAA. This is not a AAA conference. This is an indie game conference. So we're going to talk about some indies.
Yes.
And this is, so we've gone from incredibly specific to more malleable, and this next example is like probably the least specific that you can get. So this is the Forgotten Master from Towerfall, and as my extremely helpful bullet point says, what? He is forgotten from when? Why? So Towerfall has a lot of implied lore. There's no like standard like wiki that you can go to find out like what does Towerfall mean? Who is the last of the Order? There's all this implied history and implied lore with all of the characters in Towerfall, which is it's a local multiplayer game where you pick archers and shoot arrows at each other. It's very fun. But the reason that I love it so much is because I love this character and the other archers so much is because there was a very specific choice to make very specific titles for all of these archers. So the Forgotten Master speaks to a larger idea that is never explained. So you're like, why is he forgotten? Oh man, well he seemed master, okay, so he's probably like the master of like archery, I guess, but like why is he forgotten? He must have gone into hiding. Why did he go into hiding? I wonder. And then you come up with all these ideas. And it's the same way for all of the archers. The last of the Order, what is the Order? Why is she the last one? I need to know. And you make up you make up the story for yourself. And there's a great thing with this game where everyone has their favorite archer. So no one is ever like, I don't know, I'll play whatever. They're like, green's mine. I call green. I get green. And no one like refers to them by their titles, but you have this connection with these archers that I think ties into both their great character design, but also this like implied, like very little specific bit of like boop of lore and narrative that makes you be like, yeah, I'm the last of the Order. What? So this is very little specificity to a very, very effective result.
Mm-hmm. The Scythian. is wonderful, from the beautiful Sword and Sworcery. She's about as abstract as they come, visually. She's so pixelated, you kind of need to pay attention to pick up the fact that she's a lady, but she is, in fact, a badass lady warrior, like Shepard. There's an incredible array of fan art out there that really shows how much players love, similarly as to thinking up their backstories, like love imagining what she looks like. There's so many different interpretations and they're all wonderful. But she isn't left entirely to the imagination as a person. At one point in your sort of blissed out explorations of the beautiful landscape, you come across this gorgeous rainbow arcing over a chasm, and you're like, oh, how nice. As the player, you're like, oh, a lovely rainbow. And you observe, and captions comment, we Scythians loathe rainbows. On the soundtrack, I think there's a single bit of voice dialogue that just says, ugh, rainbows, or whatever it is. And it's immediately arresting. The strength of the detail lies in its counterintuitiveness. You're surprised and charmed by such an unusual sentiment. Like, who hates rainbows? Well, the Scythian does.
So this is going to get awkward. Sorry, Sarah. Well, we have to talk about Gone Home. You have to talk about Gone Home. Okay. It's like a requirement. It's in our contract. It's not in our contract. We don't have a contract. Should we have a contract? So I really like Gone Home, obviously, for various reasons. But I think Katie, the character that Sarah plays, which is why it's awkward, is a really interesting protagonist because you don't know that much about Katie, and she definitely, as Sarah's going to talk about in a second, Sam is more the protagonist than Katie is. But it's very important that Katie is who she is for that story to work. So, for example, all we know about Katie is that she's Sam's older sister, she's been abroad for a year, and she's coming back to this empty house and learning what happened to her family. Imagining that game if you were Sam's father, for example, and you were going through the house after Sam had skedaddled, and you had been there the entire time, but so self-absorbed with your own stuff that you didn't notice what was happening to your own daughter, is an interesting idea for a game, but would be a very, very different game. Even if the father didn't talk that much, even if he didn't talk at all, if that relationship was established, going through Sam's things and finding her journal entries and seeing the things that she's doing with Lonnie is going to be much different. Even if I was playing it, I'm not a father, but I'd be like, oh, I shouldn't be going through her things. This is weird. Similarly, if you were just a random person from off the street going through all of Sam's things, would be worse. So there's this really beautiful connection that is established between Katie and Sam that's mostly unspoken, that is established mostly just because it's specifically stated that they had it's indicated that there was a close relationship there. And if you have a sibling, if you're an older or a younger sibling, you can imagine what that connection might be like. Either like, I have a sense of responsibility for this person, or maybe like, I kind of hate this person, but like I feel bad that I wasn't there for her. It gives you all this stuff to play with right off the bat, even though there's not that much that we really know about Katie. So the specificity of that characterization of Katie is really important to kind of allow you to even explore that world, to make it okay for you as the player to see what's going on with Sam and see her inner dialogue.
Yeah, I think it's really fun, sort of next level player character type concepting, because you have one person as the protagonist and another that's the player. Like, I'm always really careful to say that I voice the player character and not the main character of Gone Home. That would be so misleading. I think that actually, as a side note, The Last of Us makes a really cool companion piece, because you have a romance and a young girl coming of age, but also this conscious and very clever playing of objectifying and subjectifying two player characters, kind of. Two heroes, anyway. But my favorite moment of being connected to the real hero of Gone Home, Sam, is also based in specificity. So I'm going to share it with you. It's an audio log in Sam's voice about the experience of dyeing her crush's hair. This is before they've gotten together. And it's this lovely bit of physical action that makes the scene really vivid, even though we're just getting it narrated to us. It could be innocuous. Touching someone's hair could be innocuous. We all get our hair cut, but it also cannot be. It's a very sensitive little spot in your body. So Sam describes Lonnie looking in the mirror afterward and saying, "You're so beautiful." And Sam says, "And she was looking at me with such incredulity." It's so palpable. Sam and Lonnie's romance has been really meaningful for everybody, especially for, I think, same-sex oriented players who so rarely see their loves and experiences in games. But at the same time, in that moment, the significance of these two kids' gender kind of pales or falls off compared to that universal feeling of surprise. That intoxicating jolt the first time you're really forced to wrap your head around the idea that someone you're attracted to finds you attractive. I mean, I think that it's possible there are people in this world who go from cradle to grave thinking they're just birthright gorgeous and desirable. I'm not. I don't know them. They're probably out there. So for me, that moment threw me instantly back to not just, it hit me in a specific place emotionally, but it also brought me back to a very specific time in my life. And I'd never connected with a game character that way before.
So we've been talking about games a lot, obviously, but we're going to put our actor hats on again for a little bit and talk about specs. Which are, you don't know what that word means, do you? So let's define it. A spec is a short character description that an actor receives before going into audition. Details about a character that the author perceives and communicates as key to creating the performance. No set length or format, they run a heck of a gamut, so that's a spec. So we just wanted to go through some examples to kind of give you some practical knowledge about what, if you're going to include a speaking character, a voiced character in your game, specs that you can give them that would be helpful for them, and specs that maybe you should stay away with because they might be confusing or not helpful. So this first one has just a little bit of specificity. It reads, an ambitious but antisocial female scientist. So it's not giving you a whole lot, but that's not necessarily bad. Like like the Scythian or like the Forgotten Master, a bunch of specificity doesn't necessarily mean like the best specificity. But this is just enough that you're like, oh, okay, ambitious but antisocial. Maybe she's so in her work that she doesn't know how to interact with other people, or maybe she resents other people because she wants to be on top and she's not here to make friends. Reality show joke, sorry, etc. So you have a little bit to work with there. There's a little bit of meat you can kind of chew on. And then we have something that's more specific, significantly more specific. An ambitious female scientist who lost her family in a freak laboratory accident and is constantly racked with guilt and remorse for what transpired. She's racing for a cure to save her one remaining family member who is ill. It's very melodramatic. Yeah. However, if we compare it to the spec that we just looked at, now you can kind of see, okay, if this was the same character, for example, and now I know why she's antisocial, potentially, because maybe she doesn't know how to connect with people anymore because she's grieving so much and she's so hurt that she's afraid of losing someone again, so she doesn't know how to connect anymore. And ambition for her job might mean like ambition to save her last family member. So there's a lot more, again, this is a lot of specificity. This is like more Nathan Drake level, but it doesn't mean that it's crippling by any means. It's more kind of to chew on and it's more directed, but it's also giving the actor a lot of room to find what that performance might look like. This is bad specificity. An ambitious female scientist. She's calculating and genuine, hopeful but depressive, and motherly but remote. She reads too much. That last sentence is,
specific.
It is, but I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means.
And like in any actor, if they get this, they're going to find something to do with it. Like if you get that, you're like, well, yeah, okay, I'll find a way to make this work. But if we were to compare it to our more specific spec that we just went through, hopeful but depressive, for example, you could see why that would apply to that other character. Like, okay, they're hopeful potentially that they can find a cure, they're trying to strive for a purpose, they're trying to keep their stuff together, but depressive, obviously, because most of their family's dead. But this is mostly just giving us contradictions, which doesn't really help us because it's devoid of context. It's devoid of those important specifics that give us a grounding in what this person is and what they want this person to be.
Yeah, and we do see quite a lot. You'd be surprised at how many specs we get that are directly contradictory, if you think we're exaggerating, which we're not. So, too little specificity. A female scientist. So, I mean, it's not ideal. It's not an ideal amount of specificity. It doesn't really give a lot of clues about character psychology. It's not even really, unless I'm missing something, a stereotype to kind of start from and work with and flesh out. Unless I'm like I just don't know something about the inherent qualities of a female scientist's psych profile. Someone should clue me in. But so it becomes clear quickly that with specificity, the right kind, amount, and application are necessary. Actors and players both just want enough detail to inspire them to make their own interpretations of and decisions about a character. Just as games need both mechanics and possibility space to make them engaging, so too do characters. It's just like Sid Meier said.
Wait a minute.
Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. No, he wasn't talking about acting, he was talking about games. But acting is a series of interesting decisions. So too much, what does it mean to make an interesting decision? What do you require in the way of information to make a decision, and what makes it interesting? Too much detail, especially of the superficial variety from the author or developer, and the action is fully prescribed. For example, if someone reads the lines to you exactly the way they want them said for the entire project, or a game that feels like it's kind of playing itself. Too little detail and the bounds are unclear. What a choice would look like or why it might be better than another becomes just your kind of best wild guess. The most interesting decisions come when there are multiple seemingly viable options, and the joy for an actor and a player is in discovering and embracing which is best. The Mass Effect psych profiles are actually kind of fun spec-like tidbits for the actor-player because they describe your history and your kind of reputation, how you're known, but stop short of prescribing how you choose to develop your Shepard from that point, from the starting point of the game. So you could be known for ruthlessness and continue to just be a terrifying jerkface, or you could decide that from the starting point of the game, you're going to turn over a new leaf in a tone. My second Shepard of 3 had an immaculate war hero history that nourished a growing egomania over the course of the game. And the game's code doesn't need to account for or acknowledge my decisions about Shepard's deeper psychology and motive, but my process of generating and implementing that psychology throughout the game is still what I would consider gameplay. When I asked Jennifer Hale what makes good specs, because she would know even better than I, she's seen quite a lot of them, she had this stuff to say. And we're going to lay them out in case you want to write them down, because she's really smart. She cut right to the chase, disregarding superficials and asking for clues about how the character moves through the world, coming back to our idea of these character traits as mechanics. And so, starting with details as to how they arrived at this point in time. What are the choices that they've made? What has chosen them? And how did they feel about it? Is this a world they're familiar with? Do they feel absolute freedom and familiarity with everything, or are they cautious and learning as they go? Who do they keep close around them, and why? What is it that do they affirm their values? Do they challenge their values? Do they make them feel safe? Do they make them feel brave? Let's see what else. Oh, relationships to boundaries and social norms, or as she said, are they rigid and operate within boundaries, or have permission to do whatever the heck they want?
She cursed.
How do they use their body? What's their relationship to their sexuality? Are they comfortable with it? Do they use it to get what they want? Do they not like it? Do they prefer to be known otherwise? For example, how do they use their mind? Is their mind their greatest weapon? What's their relationship to the past, present, and future? Are they nostalgic? Do they live moment to moment? Are they obsessed with what's just next and out of reach? Which comes back to objectives. We covered this. What do they want? If you're constantly checking your characters against what they want and how they're trying to get it, and seeing their personality presentation as reflective of and instrumental to that effort, you're probably doing a good job of infusing them with agency. We've established how agency and the struggle to obtain and keep it are inherently human qualities. They're integral to the character's believability, just as it's important for your player to exert in your game. And I think it's some super high percentage degree, 80%, solution to the riddle of writing characters outside of your strong characters, outside of your own background and experience. I think part of the difficulty in writing women, for example, is that we're so used to seeing women portrayed in the media as objects and not as subjects. And characters that have agency are, by definition, subjects.
So we've talked a lot about specificity, and we've talked a lot about AAA, and we've talked a bit about indies as well. The wonderful thing about indies and being in the indie space, though, is that you have a lot of room to play with all of the stuff that we've talked about as much or as little as you want. So a lot of you might be making games that don't have player characters at all. Many of you might be making games that are very, very heavily narratively focused, and we hope that this sort of stuff has been helpful for you. But we're also going to shift gears a little bit now and talk about something that's kind of close to both of our hearts, which is the idea of creating games that feature underrepresented individuals, marginalized individuals. So we've talked a lot about specificity, and also have tried to argue that specificity just means creating really human things that anyone can relate to, which means, ostensibly that anyone can relate to anyone. So I can relate to a snake in Metal Gear Solid 4, even though I am not a genetically altered old man. Similarly,
or are you?
Or am I? I've decided to bring this to apostrophe. My announcement. And just as similarly, a old genetically engineered man could really relate to Katie and Sam and Gone Home. But we wanted to sort of do a call to action and sort of make an argument for why it could be or why we believe and would like to argue that it is very important and very effective to include underrepresented individuals in the games that you are creating. So as we talked about all these characters that we sort of professed our love for, not only were they specific, but they were surprising in their specificity. So Nathan Drake, for example, was, I would argue, as beloved as he is in the game space because he's funny, because he's sarcastic, he's witty, he's not just sort of like the job is the job, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna make the job happen. It's all about, we're gonna get them, you guys. Like he's, he's not that way.
Hired.
Yeah. He's very playful. He's very funny. He gives you this sort of jolt of energy when you're playing. He's great. And this is no offense at all to Nathan Drake, but if you take Nathan Drake out of game space and put him into film space, for example, he's essentially just Indiana Jones. I mean, people have made that joke before, right? By contrast, Shepard and the Scythian, for example, are character types that we don't see in many forms of media, which are self-possessed, awesome, badass, really engaging, cool female warriors. And part of the reason I think that they're so effective, and again, to talk about Jennifer Hale and her performance, why she is so effective, is that she has the wonderful, the difficult and wonderful job of making a really really interesting and really nuanced female commander in a space where there are pretty much no strong female characters that we can really pull from. And I think she's so effective because there is that absence. People love her and rally around that character because it's surprising to see a performance that great with a character that awesome and that interesting. I have a fun and very embarrassing anecdote about Shepard, which is that I was playing the Shadow Broker DLC for Mass Effect 2, and there's this moment where she just kind of, the Shadow Broker is there, and he's going to go into some, I think, monologue.
He's like a big hulking.
And he's like a big hulking alien, and he's going to go into some monologue, like he's huge. And he's going to go into some monologue about whatever, and she doesn't even speak, she just runs up and she just clocks him. She just punches him right in the face. And I was like, oh, yes! Yes, she's so cool, and I'm cool too, and I can be cool. I literally had that moment. I was like a 7-year-old, you guys. I literally was like a 7-year-old. I was like aspirational fantasy Jennifer Hale Shepard, and I'm like 22 and like playing Mass Effect. It was ridiculous, but it really did happen that way. I really did feel like I've seen dudes punch dudes my entire life in everything that I've ever seen or played, but I'd never seen something like that before. And the connection that I had to Shepard and how much I loved her character and that I helped create her, and she just punched an alien. It was so cool.
Violence isn't the answer, but sometimes,
sometimes it totally is.
It's fun.
Yeah, sometimes it's really fun. So there's this surprise, there's this moment of surprise for me specifically as a player, where I get to see a badass lady do a badass thing. And of course, that's just a specific instance. And we're going to talk about a couple of more instances that I think are more universal. The one that I would like to talk a lot about, actually, because I love him, is Lee Everett from The Walking Dead.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Stuff. You said it.
Yeah, I didn't do this last part, though. Sorry. So, again, we're not asking at all for like a moratorium on all straight white male characters by any means, nor are we really asking for a moratorium on blank slate characters necessarily, but I think it's also doing a disservice to straight white men, people that fit that description, to only have characters that are like, we're gonna do it, you guys. You guys aren't like that, are you? Do you just go around and like, we're gonna make the sandwich, we're gonna eat it, I'm gonna go to work. It's gonna be good.
It's gonna be good.
It's gonna be good.
It's gonna be real good.
No one's like that. That's why people like Nathan Drake so much, because he's funny. So
you are not a blank slate.
You're not a blank slate. So we should be asking for more from our characters. That was sorry for glancing over that very important point. Yeah. But back to Lee. Lee is the protagonist of The Walking Dead. Wonderful voice actor.
Dave Fennoy.
Dave Fennoy. He's very great. And so The Walking Dead is a really interesting case because you are a black man in black male protagonist in just an army, zombie-infested world. like you do.
As so many of them are.
As that happens, apparently. And the really interesting thing about Lee is that you're used to straight white men being the power fantasy. So Kratos, who is literally a god, and many other all Call of Duty characters, many different types of characters are straight white male characters are sort of framed as the power fantasy, we're gonna go get him guys, sort of archetype. And so in Walking Dead, The Walking Dead is not a power fantasy. The Walking Dead is very much about disempowerment. It's about fear. It's the tension of, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to protect Clementine? Am I going to be able to save her? Without that fear, the game doesn't work. You have to constantly be worried about how you're oh my God, that game gave me so much anxiety. I just feel it everywhere. You have to be worried constantly about if you're going to be able to save her in this very hostile, horrible world. And it's really effective, I think, to start as Lee, who is a black man, because unfortunately, as recent events in Ferguson have continuously shown us, that there is a disproportionate power balance in society. Black folks in general are very disempowered in many in many areas of the world and many areas of the United States. And so coming into this world as a black man, primarily in the company of white people, men and women, is immediately like, oh man, are they going to think that I'm threatening? Are they going to trust me? Are they going to, and so this constant like struggle for power that you're engaging in is made all the more tense and all the more scary, because you're like, I don't want them to just completely disregard me and not listen to me because of the color of my skin. And there's not that many references to race in the game, but as I am a person who lives in the world, I bring in my own cultural understanding and cultural expectations into the game that I'm playing. So there's this whole tension that is immediately escalated as soon as I realize that I'm not playing a white man, which I'm used to playing in power fantasies, but a black man. And I'm in the company mostly of white folks, where I'm just, now I feel like the stakes are much higher, and I have to fight that much harder to keep Clementine safe, because I don't know how people are going to treat me. So the choice to make Lee a black man in that instance actually translates to gameplay. It actually translates to how I engaged with the game. It made it more effective at what it was trying to do. Also, you're playing the underdog, and that's part of the reason also that we loved playing female Shepard in Mass Effect, is that marginalized groups are often the underdog in real life and in games and in media. Women are very constantly damseled, and you have to go save them and that kind of thing. So when you get to be the person that's saving other people, it's like an underdog story, which we love underdog stories. Every sports movie is an underdog story. Every movie that Dennis Quaid is in is an underdog story, and he's still working. So goes to show that we love an underdog story. And so there's this sort of overcoming of obstacles that is kind of inherently baked into the choice to use underrepresented characters.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just ladies who get excited playing lady underdogs, I think is what we've sort of started to prove. There are plenty of male players who are eager to connect with player characters outside of their gender identification. It's not just for everybody who's missing seeing themselves in media. I think it's sort of taken for granted that women can relate to male heroes because we've been trained by media to do so since forever. You know, what with the diverse and innumerable range of them available. And I think it's almost a little bit insulting to imply that men don't have the same empathic interest or equipment. One of my personal all-time most exciting, thrilling experiences of a game isn't really technically mine. It was talking to my brother after I sat him down and made him play The Last of Us, and literally sitting with him through all 16 hours, with like, getting water and food and just like keeping him in place. And my brother is a super macho dude, and he struggles very actively and consciously with his received concept of what it means to be a man. For example, to protect the innocent or to be strong by this very narrow gendered definition. So I kind of assumed that and was sort of excited to, or ambivalent, nervous, curious to see if he would have this like dark affinity with Joel, who's about as terse and tough and manly a guy as they come. But we finished the game, and he said to me, like amazed, he's like, it's almost like Ellie's more badass. You know? Because my brother doesn't talk like that, that's really rude. Because she was so scared and so much more vulnerable, but she still stepped up to the plate and survived and protected the people that she cared about. And I'm pretty sure I just openly wept hearing him say that, because it was Ellie's expressiveness, her full-hearted openness about her fears and her affections, vocalized both to other characters in the game and to herself, and by extension the player, inviting the player into her perspective, that spoke to my brother and kind of gave him this permission to find strength in vulnerability and courage and honesty.
And in the indie sphere, there are a lot of indies that are doing really interesting stuff with underrepresented groups as well. Mainichi and Cartlife are a couple of really great examples. Mainichi, if you're not familiar, is a game by, unfortunately, former games journalist Maddie Bryce, who is a transgender black woman. And you are given a series of mundane choices at the beginning of the game, which are like, you have a series of choices and you can only choose 3. So it's like, do you want to eat food, or play some video games, or take a shower, or put your makeup on, or, take a little bit more time finding what outfit you're going to wear, that kind of thing. And depending on what 3 choices you make, when you go out into the world and into the public, people treat you much differently. So if you spent your entire morning just making yourself look presentable, then people will leave you alone. But if you decided, hey, maybe I should eat, then you get these snide remarks, people call you out, or they like squint at you and you're like, oh, and like kind of recoil and disgust, and so it makes this series of very specific, very universal, very humane choices from this very different perspective, so like harrowing. You're like, oh my God, how is that? So I can go outside without putting on makeup, doing whatever, and people will see me as I want to be seen, but she doesn't have that luxury. And Cartlife, which I could only play a couple of hours of because it kills my soul, is much the same way. You're given 3 different scenarios in which you can choose to view the perspective of 3 different people, and you're given a series of mundane choices, and you have to sort of deal with how someone's specific life can be so daunting and hard and difficult. And these 2 games, I honestly think, have changed people. I think they can, I think Sarah and I are here, and we hope that you're here to operate under the belief that games are powerful things that can change people, that can make people better. Not only entertain them, not only make them happy and help them connect with people, which are very essential and very important aspects of games, but also that they can be not only they can change your view on art, they can change your view on life, on people, on whatever.
And do them all at once.
And do them all at once. So we wanted to give this talk about specificity, to talk about just strengthening your tool set in terms of creating characters, but we also really would love to encourage you, when you're creating characters for your games, or not even player characters, NPCs, whatever you happen to be doing, to really consider why you're making the specific choices that you are, to consider how including an underrepresented group could potentially even bolster your mechanics or your theme or whatever you happen to be developing in your game. Because there can be some really effective, really amazing things you can do when you make those choices.
I don't think we have an ND slide.
We don't have an ND slide, but that's the end.
That's the end.
Sarah would like to thank some people very quickly, if that's all right as well.
Oh yes, thank you to Jennifer Hale, who I bugged about this concept, and thank you to everyone. Thank you to Ryan Quill, Matthew Weiss, everyone who I ever sat down with at any point in time in the past 6 months and listened to me talk about this.
Yeah. And Ben, thank you so much, all of you, for coming.
Thank you so much for being here.
And Boston Fig for having us.
Thank you for having us. Do we have time? Can we take like 1 question?
I guess we have 5 minutes.
How many questions can you answer in 5 minutes?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what they are.
How simple are the questions?
So we've got 5 minutes, and we have our microphones are in both aisles. So if you have a brief question, we'll take advantage of the 5 minutes, and you can line up at the microphone and ask your question.
You don't have to.
Don't run.
Yeah, you can also, if you don't want to.
I know it was that good. It really was that good, though, wasn't it?
You're all very kind.
It was awesome.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. I'm too short for this microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I actually have a question. You brought up Lee Everett from Walking Dead, and I played it a long time ago, so I might be incorrect, but if I remember, Lee actually has a backstory that's kind of like stereotyping. Is that not correct? How do you feel about that in terms of the fact that he was included and gives this different side, but at the same time, they kind of used a stereotypical backstory, and I don't know if I should say it or not, because I don't know.
Right. When I first started playing the game, I sort of bristled at that as well. but I think in practice, as you keep going through the game, they don't treat him as a stereotype. I think they humanize him, even though that is a kind of typical background.
Yeah.
I think they humanize him in a way that I think, at least for me, sort of dispelled my initial like, it's a black man in the back of a police car, really, everyone?
Yeah.
But I think they humanize him in a way that it made it okay for me. Although I could see arguments to the contrary, for sure.
He's also an academic, right? I mean, he's a professor, I think, which is sort of, I don't know if those things cancel each other out as such, but they are, two different, one more or less stereotyped.
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Left microphone. My left.
Oh, hello. Yes. Over. Right.
We're gonna go.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
I'll take care of it. That is me. All right. My question involved not as much gaming in general, but an actor's role in the games. I've been looking at some things like, I think Beyond Two Souls is probably one of the more interesting ideas that I've heard about. Is what do you think will be like for actors like you who actually have to get into those big those big suits and actually, and actually have to motion out what your characters in the game will be like? How do you think that'll change the dynamic of you as voice actors and then coming into actors in the game?
Well, I know that many, like for example, all of the actors on The Last of Us did that. So they all did they take the voice recording from those sessions, or did they do it separately? Yeah. So they've essentially just filmed it like a movie, which changes a lot of the restrictions of voiceover, but. Those same kind of characteristics of specificity and those same tools that we outlined still apply for sure. Yeah. But you also get the benefit of having your scene partner with you instead of having to imagine them.
Yep. I think there's, as far as technique-wise, I haven't had the opportunity to do motion capture. I'm looking forward to it, but I've been told that there's an interesting technique-wise that you are looking for, it's almost more theatrical. So you have as small, voiceover-wise, as intimate as possible as with traditional voiceover, but you have to have sort of a bigger, more expressive physicality that almost for theater in the round. And so on camera isn't quite right because you're not acting to a frame. It's this kind of interesting hybrid of being slightly more gestural, embodied work, but then also just as small and intimate as you would have on a microphone. So that's what intrigues me the most about motion capture.
It sounds interesting because it would have to be more along the lines of, I'm a theater major, so I know a little bit about what you're talking about with Stanislavski, but it'll be something more along the lines of rehearsal.
Of rehearsing, is that what you said?
Of a regular theater rehearsal, except in full, what did you call them again?
Mocap, motion capture.
Motion capture, mocap. Excuse the jargon. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. It's going to become a very popular term that you're going to all know in the next 3 years.
Yeah. Mocap.
Motion capture and performance capture are things that we are looking at. And Sarah mentioned that in her bio that you spoke with at SAG. With SAG-AFTRA, we're looking at a lot of things when it comes to performance capture and motion capture and voice, and how all the companies want everyone to do them all at once. And essentially, a lot of that stuff is for the same rate. Right. So it's becoming an important conversation for us performers in order to get the right rate for what we do if they're doing 3 facets of the performance at the same time.
Body, face, and voice.
Yep. All right.
Do we have time for another question?
Yeah.
Are we all out of time? We're out of time?
We'll take these last 2 questions. We can take 2 questions. The gentleman in the red shirt, quickly.
For those of us who played with Mark Mears' Shepard, do you think he managed to pull off the same thing, or do we really need to go back and?
Well, I know I feel bad. We just talked about Jennifer Hale the entire. I actually haven't played as Mark Mears' Shepard.
Right.
So I can't speak to it.
Mark is good.
He seems
Mark
really
is good.
cool.
I've heard he's great.
Yeah.
But he's no Nolan North.
We're just super obsessed with Jennifer Hale, and I'm
sorry.
We're
just really obsessed.
We like Mark a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark. But I would encourage you, and I should actually go back and play as him. I would encourage you to play as Jennifer Hale's Shepard as well.
Last question, over here on my left.
It's another question about The Walking Dead.
Cool.
So in the second season, how you play as Clementine, I feel like she also had that moment where you're playing as a character, as a small girl whose opinion continuously gets disregarded, but at the same time, she's the one that has to mediate all of the problems. But at the same time, I kind of had a feeling where she did feel a lot more bland than Lee. I remember one specific time where I felt...
Bland?
Bland?
Yeah. Like one time in, I think it's the 3rd episode of season 1, where Chris is talking about how Mead's really into Civil War stuff, and it's like, who else is into that? And Lee just goes like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
and I was like,
They
that was
geek
like,
out. It's cute.
I feel like that was like the moment you were talking about before. It was just like a little surprising
Specific moment, yeah.
Specific
Mhm.
moment that I really
Totally.
liked. I felt like Clementine never really had any of those moments.
In the 2nd season?
Yeah.
I haven't played it
We
myself.
haven't played it,
Oh.
so I'm
Yeah, but it could be. I'm if you're not connecting with her as much, and you cited that moment with Lee. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they've
I
done
don't
with
know.
what they did with her as a player character.
To give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe because she's just so young and still figuring herself out, a lot of those things are falling into place.
I'm not sure, but
I don't know.
Also,
I'll tweet
subjectivity.
about it at some point if I play it. When I play it.
Oh, and spoilers, at the end she goes to the moon, so sorry I
She goes to the
I
moon?
ruined that. I'm
What?
sorry I ruined it. I'm sorry I couldn't.
But this world, you know, when it comes to voice acting, and of course it is acting in general, there's a lot of subjectivity. You know, everyone has a bandwidth for what they like and don't like, and you know, we try to perform as best we can for the populace. So on that note, wonderful presentation.
Thank
really,
you.
it was
Thank
awesome.
you all for coming very much.
So good.